PPT 아니요, 전혀 아무것도 안 썼어요. 이게 왜 밖에 나와 있어? 이거 우리 어디 있어?
혹시 요약문 필요하세요?
요약문?
네. 지금 이게 본 세션 요약문인데.
아니에요, 아니에요.
다 뭐?
그러니까 왜 좀 밖으로 나와 있냐고.
아 진짜?
응.
아, 내가 부탁했어요. 근데 연사실에다가 좀 해달라고. 오시죠?
뭔데 이거?
다음 거.
그냥 거?
아, 나 이건 줄 알았어. 내가 부탁한 거 같아. 혹시 그 일정표 있어요? 연락처 있는 일정표.
연락처 있는 거?
사실은 제가 갖고 온 게 사라졌어요. 이렇게 나는데.
이거 맞나?
그 요일을...
내 파일?
사실은 담당자님 연락처.
간단한 연락처?
나중에 누나가 그 담당자님한테 해주시면 돼요.
무슨 연락처? 나 이거 다 전화해 놨거든?
마지막 세션인데 나중에 끝나자마자 바로 하려고.
이지 간다가?
네, 50분부터 시작하지.
아니요, 10분부터 다 했어요.
발표자 안 해줘. 사회자 안 해줘. 왜 다 서 계신 거지?
40분에서 60분 시간이 되면
Good afternoon. Thank you for coming to our session. Well, it is I am Director General Baek Jia from Korean Foreign Ministry, in charge of UN affairs and also humanitarian human rights affairs, also disarmament and non-proliferation issues. It is my great pleasure to welcome all of you to this session on the Republic of Korea's leadership for promoting democracy and human rights in the Asian region. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to our distinguished panel for being here today with us. Ladies and gentlemen, during the Arab Spring last year, we all witnessed the aspiration for freedom and dignity of people across borders in the Middle East and North Africa. More recently, democratic developments in Myanmar have clearly shown that democracy, based on the freedom and dignity of people, is no longer an option, but a necessity as a fundamental and universal value. Across the Asian region, many countries have taken the road to democratization over the last 2 decades. The Republic of Korea also has undergone a long process of trial and error and it struggled for the promotion of democracy and human rights in the Korean society. As a result, Korea achieved both industrialization and democratization together in one generation. For the Republic of Korea, economic growth and democratization have been achieved in a mutually reinforcing manner. Since our experience may serve as a valuable reference for other developing countries that wish to achieve both democratic advances and economic growth at the same time, we are now willing to share our own experience and lessons learned with those countries in transition. President Lee Myung-bak of Korea, at the recent meeting with Myanmar's opposition leader Aung San Suu Kyi, vowed to help Myanmar to promote democracy and human rights. Today, not only our own determination, but indeed also the expectations of the international community serve as a spur to us to do our part in the regional and global efforts to promote democracy and human rights. As a successful model of democracy and development, Korea is often considered as the most well-suited to be an effective promoter of democracy and human rights. In this regard, at the global level, Korea actively supports the promotion of democracy as a member of the community of democracy and co-chairs its working group on regional cooperation. At the regional level, we also play a leading role in the Asia-Pacific Democracy Partnership, APDP, and the Bali Democracy Forum. In addition, our democratic institutions, such as the National Election Commission and the Constitutional Court, as well as the National Human Rights Commission of Korea, assume a leadership role in sharing their own experience and know-how with other developing democracies in Asia. For example, the Constitutional Court of Korea hosted the inaugural Congress of the Asian Constitutional Courts and equivalent institutions in Seoul last week, and adopted the Seoul Declaration for the Development of Democracy, the Rule of Law, and Promotion of Human Rights and Freedom in Asia. Meanwhile, as a chair of the Association of Asian Election Authorities, the National Election Commission leads the establishment of the Association of World Election Bodies. Against this backdrop, we have invited distinguished panelists from both the private and public sector to share views and ideas on how Korea can play an even greater role in strengthening democracy and human rights in Asia. Now let me introduce our panel. Seated on my left is Ambassador Suren BADRAL. He joined Mongolia's Foreign Service in 1979 and is currently Ambassador at Large for the Mongolian Presidency of the Community of Democracies. Seated next to him, and the main speaker of the session is Dr. Yongshik, a senior researcher at the Asan Institute for Policy Studies. Before joining the institute, Dr. Bong was an assistant professor at American University's School of International Studies. He published a report on how to reinforce Korea's foreign policy on democracy and human rights under the sponsorship of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade last year. Seated on my right is Professor Changrok from the Graduate School of International Studies of Korea University. His recent publications include Characteristics of the Korean Human Rights Governance and Possibility of Diffusion in the Asian Region. Seated next to him is Dr. Morton, a senior advisor to the Open Society Foundation in the United States. He served in the Clinton, Nixon, and Johnson administrations. He has been affiliated with a number of think tanks, including the Council on Foreign Relations, the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, and also Brookings Institution. And he also taught at Harvard University, and he is very well known in the diplomatic service and also in the private sector in this area. And we have our speaker, Mr. Kouji, the Director of the Human Rights and Humanitarian Affairs Division in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Japan. He joined the ministry in 1987 and served as Minister Counselor at the Embassy of Japan in Canada from 2008 to 2011. He's also a well-seasoned diplomat in the Japanese community. And I'm very pleased to have such great speakers present at our session today. And I'm confident that with the benefit of your shared insights and enthusiasm, this session will bear much fruit. Well, first, let us welcome Dr. Yongshik, our main speaker, to the floor. Dr. Bong.
All right, thank you very much, Director General Peck, for kind introduction. I'm very pleased to be here. I'd like to first express my gratitude for the organizers of Jeju Forum. This is my first time attending this wonderful event with all the renowned and established experts from around the globe. And I'd like to thank the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade for organizing this session, as well as the continued sponsorship for my institute, Asan Institute for Policy Studies, research activities on how South Korea would contribute to promoting and protecting human rights and democratic values in the world. Although I was introduced as a main speaker for the sake of leaving sufficient amount of time for more interactive and productive dialogue among experts, which I believe is the main spirit of this Jeju Forum, I'd like to confine my speech to about 10 minutes. And there's a more important reason for that. That is, being with such towering authorities in the area of democracy promotion, such as panelists we have today, that suddenly reminds me the old Korean saying that 문자 앞에서 문자 쓰지 말아라. You never recite the Chinese classics in front of Confucius. So I'd like to just organize my talk on two major points that are related to what Director General Peck just highlighted in her introductory remarks, which is that South Korea must be the only example in history of modernization that succeeded not only in rapid industrialization following the model of free market economy, but also political liberalization at the same time in a single generation. The linkage or their lack of between economic modernization and political liberalization has been probably one of the longest and most interesting, if not most frustrating, topic for students of economics, political science, as well as policymakers in government. So, main argument that I would like to make today is that South Korea has so much to offer the entire world. As an example, that achieving both lifting gold is not something impossible, but a very achievable goal. I'd like to begin by pointing out the current trends in global politics, posing both opportunities and new challenges to South Korea, and see if South Korea could effectively ride on such a new trend in global politics. Let me begin with the global and regional atmosphere in which South Korea is located as of today. There has been saying whether we are entering into an era of democratic boom or democratic recession. According to the most recent Freedom House statistics on the global level of democracy, the phenomenon that the level of global freedom sliding for the past 5 consecutive years seems to have stopped last year, which means that the number of electoral democracies in the world, which was 115 last year, has increased by 2 to 117. Whereas the number of countries that are categorized by these statistics as free remain the same at 87. And the number of countries categorized as partly free democracies also remain the same in last year and this year at 60. But the number of countries not free has increased by 1, from 47 last year to 48 this year. What does it imply to South Korea? Well, I would argue that whether we are entering into an era of democratic revival, even in a slightest sense, or continuation of democratic stagnation, if not recession, it doesn't really matter to South Korea to play an important role for democratic protection and promotion. My assessment is based upon some outside experts' own arguments. For instance, Larry Diamond suggested in his article in January issue of Journal of Democracy that, quote, if there is going to be a big new lift to global democratic prospects in this decade, the region from which it will emanate is most likely to be East Asia. And in summary essay for Freedom House this year also seemed to point out the same finding, saying that, quote, over the past 5 years, the Asia-Pacific region has been the only region in the world to record steady gains in the majority of indicators of political rights and civil liberties. So aside from the general trend in global politics between rise of autocratic values and the rise of democratic values, the Asia-Pacific region seems to be rather insulated from that, and which highlights the potential for South Korea to continue to play an important role, at least in the regional context. My next point is that whether it is a right policy choice for South Korean government and civil society to pour energy and resources for the projects that will make international contributions to enhancing democracy overseas, as opposed to using the same energy and resources to share valuable experience of rapid industrialization with other countries. The choice between using political measures to make international contributions and using economic measures to make international contributions to rise as a global power and stakeholder. The widely held overriding assumption is that experience of the industrialization would be easier to sell to the rest of the world and more attractive to other countries because economic development, according to this view, has an innate advantage to make universal appeal. It's easier to be quantified and framed in universal and scientific vocabulary. I'd like to conclude my remark by posing skepticism on this assertion. I personally believe that South Korea's potential to share its political achievements as a now new mature democracy in the world, its potential is great, and its chance for success is at least as great as the chance for success for South Korea to share its model of economic growth. Let me just quickly cover 4 points as a response to the criticism. The critics say that, well, South Korean public will not support South Korean government using taxpayers' money to help enhance democratic values abroad. What about public support for South Korean government using taxpayers' money to help other countries' economic development? According to our own public opinion survey, which can be available to you if you ask, indicates that the top 2 issues that occupy the South Korean public's mind and which will be very important in the upcoming presidential election in December are, first one is job creation, especially for young population. 2, distribution of wealth. National security is very remote third, and there is no strong support for enhancing democracy. So when you consider public aversion to using economic resources for foreign policy goals as opposed to improving public life and welfare, then I don't think the chance for success for sharing experience of industrialization with the rest of the world is only as good as the chance for success for South Korean government to advertise its proud history of political liberalization. The second concern is whether South Korea's effort to promote democracy would violate sovereignty principle. But I'll just briefly say that deciding on ownership, self-help, innate capacity are also very important consideration in South Korean government's decision to provide official developmental assistance. So sovereignty and universal values are in delicate balance, not only in the realm of democratic enhancement, but also in economic decisions to help other countries to achieve economic development. Third point is suspicion of effectiveness. How do you know that if South Korea makes an investment in democratic promotion, whether there will be worthwhile dividend in the future? I guess the chance is as good in the realm of economic assistance as it is in the political realm. And the fourth and final point is that South Korea's transferability of South Korea's political achievement is as good as a transferability of its economic development model. South Korea has overcome the legacy of military authoritarianism and transitioned from military authoritarian government to democratic government, thankfully, did not result in massive and prolonged civil strikes or bloodshed political purges, which may be of interest to some countries who are in transitory period from military dictatorship or one-party rule to more liberalized form of politics. I'll end my remark here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bong, for the presentation. Now our next speaker is Ambassador Suren BADRAL. I give the floor to Ambassador BADRAL.
We love having you here. This is the first panel I saw when I was traveling from the Jeju airport to this hotel. So I think this is the spirit that the Jeju people and also the Korean people extended to us to this important forum. I'm happy to see that the people of Korea is increasingly becoming a world leader, not only economically but also in promoting human rights, democracy, and the world, especially in the Asia-Pacific region. As we listened this morning to Prime Minister Kim, when he said the world is experiencing major transition changes these days, and he said also there's a strong demand for changes in the way the capitalism works. I was thinking what changes should be done so that this transition that we are experiencing should be completed successfully. I think the non-human changes in the world is taking place very rapidly, but the change in the human minds is the slows getting back from living the rapid change in the development is becoming more with help because of this human change is not taking place as we want. So how we can make changes to happen in the minds, that is only through the development of democracy, strengthening the democratic values, and improving the quality of democracy. I think the Korean people is one of the peoples in the world who suffered most during the 20th century. So that is why the Korean people is so much valuing the democracy, the democratic principles, because they have seen why it is important. But in my view, that changes in the Korean people's minds have taken place. But elsewhere, it is not taking place as we want. That's why we will need the leadership of Korea in terms of promoting democracy and trying to make the quality of democracy more tuned to the need of the contemporary world. As also the Prime Minister Kim alluded this morning, today no single power can be dominant, can be carrying out any changes. It can be done only collectively. That's why whatever we want to do in terms of changing the world, changing our minds, it should be done together by same-minded countries. That's why our President Edward George, and President Lee last year put forward an initiative that is called Asian Partnership Initiative for Democracy. The intention of the initiative is to bring together those democratic countries in Asia and Pacific so that they can combine and coordinate their efforts and their resources to help each other. In some countries that we consider democratic, there happen to be some setback. Some countries stumbles, and in that case, the other countries have to help. So this is the collective mechanism that we would like to create so that we can help each other in terms of when some have a problem. This is not the intention of this initiative to impose or export any democracy to other countries that we consider not democratic. But by our example, we can show the other world that the democracy, the democratic world is the most efficient way to change the minds of the people and to improve the well-being of different nations. The Republic of Korea has a very solid experience in terms of taking the lead in any or number of international initiatives. As Madam PAIK mentioned, the Asia Pacific Democracy Partnership Initiative that was in place since 2007 was hosted by the MOFAT, and we had also the experience of the Republic of Korea in chairing the Community of Democracies in 2002. So the experience of the Republic of Korea in promoting democracy and also leading the group of democratic countries is very valid, and we would like to use this experience so that the initiative that we have in mind or we have already put forward would be led by the Republic of Korea. I think I would not dwell too much on this. The last thing I would like to say is that we have 11 countries in the Asia-Pacific region in terms of the UN regionalization that belong to a group of democratic countries. And from out of the 11 countries, we have, for example, Kyrgyzstan, which has just embarked upon the path of democratic development. We have also witnessed this morning the speech of the Prime Minister of Kyrgyzstan. The Timor-Leste, for example, was also recently has become recently part of the democratic Asia, I would say. But that process was led by the United Nations led action. Now we see changes in Myanmar or Burma, which is driven by the leadership itself. So we have three different types of changes, very recent changes in Asia, which has led to some democratic transformations. So these new countries that are embarking upon the democratic path need to be helped, assisted, because it is very difficult when you start making transformations. It is very difficult to do it on your own. These new democracies have to learn from the mistakes, wrongdoings that we have had in the past. I think the Republic of Korea had also some mistakes. Mongolia had also some mistakes. So we are learning also our own mistakes. At the same time, we would like share our mistakes with others so that they can avoid bad mistakes, and so that their way to democracy will become shorter and less cumbersome. So that's why we need to get together to help each other. That's why we have this initiative to launch Asian Partnership Initiative for Democracy. This initiative, together with the Asia Pacific partnership, democracy partnership initiative by George Bush, and the Bali Democracy Forum proposed already in place by Indonesia, can work together so that we can help each other from different angles. So these are not exclusive of each other, but they are complementary. If they can work together, then the community of democratic Asia would be very strong, and we are working towards the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Brown. Well, now let me ask Professor Asan for his insightful views on this topic.
Thank you. It's a great honor and pleasure to be here. I'd like to thank Director General HALPERIN for giving me a great chance to come here in this wonderful venue. I wrote a short paper in order to give you my thought about this issue. And I realized that if I read this, it will take more than 10 minutes, and also will be very boring. So I'd like to tell you just the important points that I wish to make in this paper. There are 3 topics that I'd like to address. The first is to discuss the reason why Korea needs to accept a leadership role on the issue of democracy and human rights. And second one will be how to move forward to acquire such leadership. Meaning, for example, what such leadership entails, how to do it, and what to do it, and those issues. Then thirdly, I'd like to make a few proposals on how to achieve these proposals. First, in regards to why Korea needs to accept the leadership, I think Dr. Yongshik mentioned that I wish to address. Mainly, we know that Korea and Japan are only two countries that have succeeded in democratization and economic development at the same time. And in Asia, there are 46 Asian countries, and only 2 countries have succeeded simultaneously in economic development and democracy. So Japan and Korea should have such a leadership in the region of Asia. And particularly Korea is important because their experience is rather recent. And a lot of Asian countries are trying to learn from Korean experience, both in terms of economic growth and their political liberalization. And in regards to the second topic, it's a main issue in front of us, democracy and human rights. And I'd like to say about 3 issues. The first one is issue of relationship between human rights and democracy. And secondly, the importance of the economic, social, and cultural rights in relation to civil and political rights in Asia. And thirdly, the so-called network governance, the importance of network governance. And lastly, the changing meaning of the national interest in this global society. The first one is about the relationship between human rights and democracy. And it is a highly debatable and very delicate issue. But I think there's a clear difference between 2. Many people tend to relate democracy to human rights. Obviously, there's a very intimate relationship and closely intertwined in many ways. But it is important to recognize, in my opinion, that human rights is more fundamental concept than democracy. And thus the focus of the leadership we are working to ponder and discuss here today should be more on human rights than democracy. the scope of human rights is much broader than that of democracy, and the rights that are related to democracy can largely be categorized into civil and political rights. Human rights is individuals' fundamental rights, whereas democracy is one of the many political systems. And if you enhance democracy, then civil and political rights will be improved. But we have to remember that we do have in human rights economic, social, cultural rights, which is equally important. And in case of East Asia, I do believe many human rights violations are related to the economic, social, cultural rights. Many Asian countries continue to struggle from poverty, lack of clean water and disease. And these human rights violations are directly related to economic development. And so I'd like to point out that these economic, social, and cultural rights are just as important as civil and political rights, especially in the context of human rights violation in Asia. And concentrating on human rights as a fundamental basis for leadership shows that there are a number of important things to consider before Korea can become a leader that promotes human rights and democracy. I'd like to point out the third one, the importance of network governance. What I'm trying to say is, in 20th century, the leadership was done by the government. So we tend to think that South Korea has to exercise the leadership, and that's the role of Korean government. But we know that in 21st century, in the era of globalization or postmodern society, there are diverse sectors. There are NGOs, private sectors, and international organizations. The leadership should be done through the collaboration among various actors. Government is not the only actor who can exercise leadership. And that's why I emphasize the network governance. Network governance is a concept that can be utilized in order to create a leadership position for Korea in the realm of democracy and human rights in Asia. So, for example, when there is a violation of civil and political rights in a particular Asian country, it's very difficult for a government to make a voice because it is considered as a violation of sovereignty or intervention. But if you support such NGOs who can make a voice, then it's sort of indirect leadership. And there's a lot of possibilities of collaborating various actors. So diverse entities, including participation from NGOs, public sectors, and private sectors, collaborate and share the experience to create a model for efficient and effective leadership. And fourth point I'd like to make is the changing concept of national interest. In 19th century and 20th century, the national interest is considered as a wealth and power. In order to have a national interest, we should be wealthy and we should have more military capabilities. It's kind of in the zero-sum game. We win more, we gain more, and others will lose more. But in 21st century, the core prosperity, global core prosperity and commonwealth. In other words, the core prosperity and global wealth increase, then our interest will increase. So when we set up the leadership, foreign policy, then we have to change our mindset that national interest is not a zero-sum game anymore. And lastly, I'd like to make a few proposals, 3 proposals to enhance human rights and democracy in Asia. The first proposal is to suggest the possibility of establishing a Korean endowment for Asian human rights to concentrate efforts on Asian human rights by supporting democracy and promoting human rights activities. I think people know that there is a national endowment for democracy in the United States. It is a private non-profit grant-making organization that was created to strengthen democracy around the world. And it supports more than 1,000 projects from non-governmental groups abroad, which are working for democratic goals in more than 90 countries. I propose that we create a similar organization that concentrates efforts on broader human rights issues in Asia without limiting its scope to civil and political human rights. Secondly, I'd like to emphasize the importance of regular human rights forums that include strong and consistent participation by various actors in the field. It will provide an opportunity for discourse to create new ideas and evaluate progress that has been made. And finally, I think this is really important. Investment needs to be made to promote human rights awareness and education programs within Asia. And one of the biggest problems of human rights violations is that victims do not know their rights and that they qualify for protection. So increasing recognition of human rights in Asian countries through education is a critical step for enhancing human rights. I think this is something that Korea can do through the collaboration of government and civil society and international organizations. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Shaw. He made quite interesting proposals, both for the public sector and private sector. And organizing a regular human rights forums with participation of various sectors should be really a good one. And about the establishment of Korean endowments for Asian human rights, so that would require lots of resources and public support for that. And well, I guess that Dr. Bong truly agrees that there should be such level of support within Korean society. Well, we will see. Well, now let me invite Dr. HALPERIN for his views and ideas and suggestions.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here. And I certainly want to begin by endorsing the importance of collaboration between governments and civil society in promoting democracy and human rights. I think it clearly is an important relationship between the two, but I think my view is that it is very hard to protect or advance human rights in non-democratic countries. And therefore, I would stress the importance of helping countries make a transition to democracy, which will then make it possible to implement and protect and advance both civil and political rights and economic and social rights. I don't think it's a mistake to think about democracy as only involved in civil and political rights. In fact, as Korea demonstrates, democracy is the most effective path to the promotion of economic rights as well as political and civil rights. The fact is that democracies better deal with the economic problems of their society than do non-democratic countries, and particularly do better at sharing the wealth in ways that eliminate the basic human deprivations that come from extreme poverty. As you've already heard from all the other speakers, Korea is in a unique situation. It is a country that demonstrates that poor countries can be democratic, but that also that poor non-democratic countries can transition at the same time from both poverty and autocracy to a democratic country which respects the economic as well as the political rights of its people and which advances an egalitarian economic agenda. And I think that Korea should announce that it intends to expand and implement a democratic foreign policy aimed at encouraging other countries to get on the path of democracy and then to help them remain on that path if they should choose to do so. And one arena in which it should do that is the global arena, and I would argue the best way to do that is through the community of democracies. Korea was one of the founders of the community. It was one of the 5 or 6 countries which invited other countries to Warsaw to approve the Warsaw Declaration, which emphasizes, by the way, both economic and political rights. And Korea has served as the second president of the community after Poland, and has now become active again as the community under first the Lithuanian and then the Mongolian leadership has become a more active organization with a concrete set of programs. Korea, as you've heard, is a member of the Governing Council as well as the Executive Committee and co-chairs the Working Group on Regional Cooperation. Korea has also begun to be active, and I would hope it will become more active in one of the important new initiatives of the CD, which is the Democracy Coalition Partnership, which is now focused on Moldova and Tunisia, and which we expect at the Ulaanbaatar Summit will add other countries as well, and perhaps other countries will be added even before that. And that is an important mechanism for, on a global basis, helping countries that have chosen the path of democracy to remain on that path and to strengthen their democracy. I believe it's worth considering that Korea also used its leadership on the Working Group on Regional Cooperation to help strengthen the global effort to prevent military and other unconstitutional interruptions of the democratic process. And it can do so by helping regional organizations strengthen the mechanisms that they have for responding to a military coup or another interruption of the democratic process, and to insist upon a return to democratic and constitutional government. Now, I think Korea can also play an important role outside the community of democracies in encouraging cooperation among the democratic countries of Asia. As we've heard, there exist 2 institutions which supposedly do this. One, the APDP, which, if it was ever active, is now moribund, and the other, the APID, which has not yet begun to function in any serious way. I would suggest that the 2 should be combined into one group, which should, at least at the start, be very informal, as the community of democracies was when it started. And the way to do that, I would suggest, is for Korea to take the lead in convening informally discussions among Asian democratic countries on the margins of regional and global organizations. For example, at ASEAN +3 and in the OFF, there should be discussions about how to strengthen the human rights institutions of ASEAN, and more generally, how ASEAN can become a vehicle for promoting democratic values and respect for human rights. It should do the same thing on the margins of the Bali Forum, which brings together all of the countries of Asia and many countries on the periphery of Asia, including many countries that are not democratic. Korea should convene during the meetings of the Bali Forum the democratic countries that are present to talk about how to use the Bali Forum to promote democratic rights. When an Asian country begins the transition to democracy, as is now happening in Kyrgyzstan, and we hope is happening in Burma or Myanmar, Korea should convene a meeting of the Asian democratic states to discuss how best to assist that process, both within the community of democracies and specifically within the Asian Forum. I also think it's important for the Asian democratic countries to meet in advance of Asian regional groupings at the UN, whether in New York or in Geneva, when matters which affect democracy are at stake. And these include determining the slate of Asian candidates who will be supported for the Human Rights Council, where there is a requirement that countries, in deciding who to vote for, take account of the human rights record and the commitment to human rights of the countries that are nominated. The Asian region has tended to ignore that. Korea, Japan, and other democracies have gone along with slates, which include many countries whose commitment to human rights and to democracy is simply non-existent. It is also important for the Asian democracies to talk among themselves when it is Asia's turn to chair the General Assembly or the Human Rights Council, again to be sure that the country representing Asia in that very critical position is a country with a commitment to human rights and democracy. And finally, I want to suggest that as Korea becomes an aid donor, it should adopt a policy of giving preference to poor democratic countries in making its aid decisions. That, in fact, is not done by any democratic donors. If you look at the record of contributions to countries for development, in fact, democratic countries are as likely to give assistance to non-democratic countries as they are to democratic countries. In my view, that makes no sense. We know from the record that democracies do better at development than non-democratic countries. So even from an efficiency point of view, Korea will get more effort, more bang for the buck from its development assistance that it gives it to democratic countries. But also, we want to encourage countries to get on the path of democracy and help them stay on that path. And since development assistance will always be a scarce resource, I think my own view is we, Korea and the United States, all democratic countries, should only give development assistance. I'm not talking here about humanitarian assistance for free, but real development assistance should only go to democratic countries. But at the very least, we should give preference to democratic countries in developing an assistance program. And Korea, as a new donor, should take the lead, in my view, in doing it.
Thank you, Dr. Humphrey. Well, our last speaker is Director Abe from Japan.
Thank you, Ambassador PAIK. First of all, I would like to also echo my voice in expressing my deep respect to the organizers and especially the government of Korea in organizing this very prestigious forum. And I indeed thank you for inviting me to this session. Being the last speaker, pretty much of what I've heard has been already spoken by other speakers, but I would also want to, first of all, point out the unique role of Korea in leading democracy in Asia because of its unique position, experiencing military rule, but overcoming that difficulty and now being a free and democratic and prosperous country. I think this serves really as an excellent and useful model for other Asian countries. I would also want to add my voice to other speakers in Korea's leading role in the community of democracies. And also the very fact that you are organizing this forum is also indeed a very encouraging and useful opportunity for us to exchange views on how Korea and other countries can do to promote democracy in Asia. I would also like to